Number 2 for the Budget and Finance Committee's wish list workshop. We had a great, extensive meeting last Thursday, and I think managed to get through every item that was on there. There were a couple of questions that were raised that we want to kind of circle back around to cover, and then anything else people want to discuss. Our goal for the evening is to have enough of a discussion that we've got a general idea of what our prioritizations are for this. I will say again, this is a good neighborhood-oriented budget, and it is a good year for our finances, but we do not have unlimited resources, and we will have to make hard choices. So I hope people will keep that in mind and know that there are some great things on here that we may not be able to fund. So we just need to be very thoughtful as we try to go through and figure out what our top priorities are. So I appreciate all the work and thought that people have put into this process so far, and I look forward to a good discussion this evening. So that being said, the biggest topic on this, and I think I would like to just start by establishing what I believe is consensus, that we have no choice but to fill the $22.6 million gap that was blown in the school budget when the state's BEP formula calculations changed the day after we announced the budget. So we went over that list of items that we would use to fill that hole. Some of those funding sources are also funding sources that are listed as possibilities for items that we want tonight. So that's going to begin to be some of the hard choices that we have to make. We may do some shifting around. I mean, I think it's less important to worry about whether your particular funding source is available to fund your particular item. If we can pull it from somewhere else and still make it happen because it's been designated as something that everybody values, we'll probably do our best to work that out. But just be aware that we've already, in trying to fill the $22.6 billion gap in school funding, have already tapped a lot of the available resources. And I will also just reiterate the comments that I think I'll let our finance director say this, if I can put you on the spot. Just again, a reminder about what our fund balance is for, what the GFOA recommends for fund balance, and where that leaves us in terms of both how we fund recurring resources, recurring expenses, and how much of what we are looking at as fund reserve really should be even thought about as a possibility.
Thank you. So just where are we now? Just a reminder, the current fund balance policy that was passed in '89, implemented in 1991, requires 5% of operating costs within the operating funds. As I mentioned before, we knew we had this $22.6 million gap, that's a disproportionately low number, and that we should take another look at that policy. The state comptroller as well as GFOA both recommend 2 months of operating reserves. I think that's something we'll look to get to as we revisit that policy. Also within that fund balance policy, same policy, 1989, implemented in 1991, it mirrors the comptroller's recommendation as well as GFOA's best practice, and it says that the city will be structurally balanced every year, and that recurring revenues will equal recurring expenses. So that means that you cannot use one-time revenues to fund recurring expenses. So things like fund balance for things that are recurring costs is not an appropriate use. And we talked about last time, and I see some new faces today, we were able to go through the operating budget and identify about $8 million in truly one-time funding that's in the operating budget. So I think we're comfortable using about $8 million in fund balance to satisfy a portion of that $22 million. But beyond that, there were some things that were kicked around last time. The three big ones was there's a study around space planning for $1 million, a study around IT for $1 million, and $1 million for incentive bonuses for police and fire. So those big $3 million are within that $8 million that we've already identified as one-time funding sources. So we can't double dip on those. Those are already part of the 8. So if you're fundamentally opposed to those, and you don't want to fund them, we can take them out, but it's just going to reduce the 8 down to another number. I just wanted to make sure people appreciated that we've already counted those kind of in the bucket. And
Thank you.
just one more thing I'd ask you to consider as we think about this budget is, I appreciate it's very strange for me to say on one side of my mouth that revenues are up and we're doing great, and at the same time to tell you that the future is unknown, but the future is very much unknown. So just a reminder, well, the 22 budget is expected to be about 250 million actual versus what we budgeted. 22 actual versus 23 projected is only about a 4% growth. It's not huge, and we'll be lucky if we see it from 23 into 24. So think about, as you're contemplating things, how are we going to sustain this going forward, not just can we afford it today? Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe someone has said 80% of economists think that a recession is possible. So that that's an important words to the wise to keep in mind on that optimistic note. But we have a good budget in front of us, and we want to try to be responsive to what we heard from citizens is important, and at the same time be responsible and ensure that next year we will also be able to have a good budget. So with that, the first thing I want to do is go over some of the questions that were specifically raised at last meeting's discussion, and then if there are other questions people have about items on the budget, we can work through those. And then if there are any items that just rise to the top in terms of consensus, that may be worth discussing. And then we'll move on to our experiment in quadratic voting, just again to provide us another guideline for prioritization. So I'm going to start with the list of things that I have. If people can remember other things they wanted information on, we'll come back to those. The first question that was raised was a question about the Chamber of Commerce. Two questions that were raised was, has it brought growth, and what value does it provide to our Economic Development Department? I did have an email from Mr. Pogue simply saying that they provide him a service that he is grateful to have, and that, for the upcoming year, that is something that he still is very comfortable having them to provide. So I hope I'm not misquoting his words, but that's an email that I'm happy to forward to people. And just had also gotten further information from the chamber that they have had 20% growth over their pre-COVID numbers, and that they were able to not charge any of the small businesses during the COVID difficulties, just to indicate their support of small business. So I think those were questions I was not able to answer because I couldn't get my computer to come up at the time. There was also a question on how much are we paying Dell annually, and I think I may ask Ms. Darby if you can answer that question.
So the contract allows us to pay up to $500,000 when they submit their documentation. I believe we have been paying the amount that they have requested over the past several years, and I believe it to be the full amount. Finance has told me that much. But that would be a contractual obligation that we have with Dell, that we've had for many years now, and we will have for many years to come. So it's not something that we can draw from to put towards other expenses.
Thanks. And then the next question that I had on my list was just trying to refine the numbers on the historic plaques. I don't know that we've gotten an official number. I'm sorry, no, the historic plaques. The estimate is that it's somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 per plaque. The goal was to enable all 35 district council members to have one installed during the course of 4 years in the term. So I have adjusted that number, you'll see on here, to assume that it averages to $3,500 and multiplied that by 35 council members and divided by 4 years. So it's a little bit less than that 40,000 that we saw the other day, but it still should be enough to make that able to happen. But it doesn't mean all 35 can get them in the coming year, but just that over the course of the 4 years you can. Okay, and then I think we're still waiting on confirmation about there were two pots that Director Flannery's already mentioned the self-insurance liability and the judgments and losses, that we have roughly $1 million available to us. We believe we have tapped those to some degree. And was there any confirmation on if that's consistent with what the actuarial requirements are?
Oh, yeah, I was, sorry, when I was referencing those 3 pots earlier, those were not those 3. So those was the 2 studies and,
Okay, great.
so this is separate, so.
So those are
2
available.
funds, and I'm working to get a more detailed fact sheet together. For the 2 funds, we expect there's about $1 million in each one of those funds. While we would not encourage you to use it, because they are unknown, they exceed the actuarial required contribution by $1 million each one.
Okay. And we should all do our best to ensure that we do not get sued. So, that just for your information. So that is a possibility of funding sources. I had referenced my very crude 4-year look ahead. I don't know that we'd expected Director Flannery to have hers done by this week, but we'll say again that over the long run, we do expect to have more of a 4-year, or at least a forward-looking forecast on what our budget will look like, which I think is helpful in terms of, again, acknowledging if we know we're not going to raise taxes every year, what's that going to look like? Because as other expenses rise, there's only so much growth that happens, and that will give us some real numbers or some better projections than what an engineer can produce in terms of what the future years look like. But my very crude amount said that we shouldn't get too happy this year. So keep that thought in mind. And finally, I think one of the biggest items was what we spent quite a significant amount of time on was the M&PS support staff raises. And we have gotten, and Councilmember Sawara, I hope you've been able to read that email from Ms. Roberg to respond to that. But we have input from several directions that I would like to offer the possibility of hearing. I will say that in asking Shannon Hall, our HR director, if she could comment. Oh, Frida, you're here in perfect timing. Great. We were talking about the support staff raises that were a topic of much discussion during the public hearings. Director Hall, our HR director, reiterates again that the M&PS pay plan is not under her purview, so she can't officially speak about that. But in general, providing raises across a pay plan can be very complex, and trying to figure out how to take a single number and apply it in a way that's fair is something that will simply take some calculating. So with that being said, I would like to offer both Ms. Player and Jason Freeman about 3 minutes each to give just a very high-level view of where that number $9 million came from. It's very possible that we may not be able to find that amount, so it would be helpful to know if we had to do something smaller, how that would work. Yeah, come on up and have a seat, and if you can respect my time limit, I'll be amazed, but very pleased. So just to give us a little bit of a background on where that number comes from, how you see it breaking down, and then I would also invite Ms. Player to speak from the school board perspective. So thank you.
Sure. So the number sort of came from the living wage idea, and I will just zoom way out for a minute and say the reason that we came up with the number is because there was a pay study between the mayor's office and the Public Ed Foundation and HR consultant, and we were not included in any of those conversations. And that's why we had to come up with our own number, because we asked repeatedly, what is the goal of this study? What are we trying to accomplish? What metrics are we using? And we weren't in the room to be able to give input. So we started with teachers received an average raise of $6,900. Teachers make substantially more than our support staff folks do. And we started there, but then when the MIT calculation came out and Metro follows that policy, at the time we came up with this number. We looked at $32,800, and that would have gotten what we thought was most people to living wages. And so just sticking with those numbers, after having seen what the mayor has proposed, that money can't get spent, like it doesn't get spent the same way, because the mayor made commitments at the state of Metro about paid family leave, for example, that eats up $4.7 million. We're very happy that that benefit is there, but that money is committed in a way that we couldn't reallocate. So what we did to fit with what has been proposed by the mayor, and actually to address the concerns, I heard a comment from Ms. Hall about compression. We really tried to make sure there will be no compression here. And what we did is we did exactly what the mayor is doing for food service employees, which is everyone gets the step raise that is eligible. Everyone gets a 4% cost of living adjustment. And the mayor had proposed adding $2 an hour to food service employees. And so what we did is we took, what is the total number? We represent about 2,870 people. Collectively, they all work different numbers of hours. So to address the concerns that some people had about a flat dollar amount on the annual raise, we went with an hourly flat amount to reflect that. And so we divided the total number of hours worked by the $9 million that would be allocated. And that, by our count, gives us enough money to do, instead of $2 an hour for just food service, and I will address the parapro change. They had a different approach with the paraprofessionals that we are using the same approach for everyone. This does not include bus drivers, but everyone in support staff that we represent would get the step raise, the 4% COLA, an additional $327 an hour, if my math is right, with the cost of benefits and insurance. The paraprofessionals, the reason that we decided to propose something different than what the study had proposed is they move them 2 grades up. And that benefits the people that have been here longer more and in kind of a disproportional way. And so the reason that we decided to shift that is a couple of years ago, some of you will remember there was additional funding that came out of the budget, I believe in 2018, just for paraprofessionals. And the amount of money that was asked for at that time was not calculated correctly. And so when they got the money at MMPS and tried to figure out how to spend it, it didn't go as far as they thought. And so they bunched up 450 people. They knocked everyone back to step 2. Sorry, I'm out of time.
Yeah.
I'm almost
Can you
done.
wrap it up?
And so there are, on the spreadsheet that I sent out, it tells you the total number of employees in the department, but also in the specific step. These are just examples. This is not everybody, but it's a really good broad example of how it would affect everyone. There's 460 people in step 2, paraprofessionals. Those people are earning $24,790 a year. So in our proposal, those people end up about $1,200 better. And someone like Miss Honey, who you all have seen before, she ends up about $1,600 less. She's still getting than the mayor's proposal, but both groups are getting about $6,500, right? So, and that just more equitably moves those people up at the bottom and gets them to $30,000. And I would just say the biggest hole we're filling is the mayor's proposal left most categories of people untouched, except for the 4% COLA. And there's about 1,880 people that make less than $30,000 right now. Under our plan, that number gets knocked down to about 550. Under the mayor's plan, you go from 1,880 to like 1,750, still making less than 30,000. So, take any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's do questions after we've heard all around. So then we have Budget Chair Frida Player Peters. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Tell us what you know.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. So for the board and the administration, our number one goal is to solve the $22 million deficit that was left by the state that we did not foresee, and that came out after the mayor filed his budget. And so we've been working with the administration to make sure that we can do that in a fair and equitable way that does not affect the employees and the students with little least harm. And we're pretty confident that we can get there in a responsible manner. We will be delighted of any new monies that comes after we solve that issue to go to employee compensation. That was our number one priority. And all new monies that we've had in this budget is going to employee compensation. Last year was certificated staff. This year is support staff, and that's been our goal. And the question is, how do we work together to really do that? I'm personally committed, and the board's committed to working with SEIU to do that. We want to make sure that we do it in a fair and equitable way and make sure that we look at all the fine details to make sure that happens. So this is a different conversation that we planned earlier, that all new monies will go. We can make a full investment into support staff because we understand we want our support staff to work and live in Davidson County. We know that Davidson County has become more expensive to live in. We want them to be in touch with the communities, with the students that they teach and serve and provide services to. And so at this point, once we fill the $22 million deficit, then we really want to come with a full-throated kind of discussion of what do we do with the additional new monies that, if you guys will find, how to work that with the support staff and make sure that our employees can be really, for that commitment. And this has been a multi-year effort, starting with teachers and support staff, and an ongoing effort. We don't expect this to be a one-time, ongoing thing of making sure this is the only time we're doing. We want this to be an ongoing conversation, an ongoing financial priority of making sure our employees are the best employees that we have in our community. And so I know we are committed to having that conversation. We're looking at SEIU's plan, and we want to get to the shared goal of making sure that employees have a livable wage and making sure that all the pieces fit together with support staff, certificated staff, administrative staff, and make sure that we can maintain it in the long run, and that we're making sure that as we kind of go through this process of times of paying for decisions that have been made in the past decade, where our employees have not been paid efficiently or the way I desire them personally, how do we start making up and compensating for that? And that's been the discussions of the board, since most of us have been elected since pre-COVID. And so, and as we go through this and as we recover from the COVID period, we really want to get back to those goals of filling that number one priority of employee compensation.
Thank you. And then I'm going to ask Councilmember Suara if there's anything you want to add from what Ms. Roberg, who is MNPS's legal counsel and
HR director.
And HR director. So she had sent an email as well. Is there anything from there that you would want to add to this?
Yes, ma'am. I guess the only thing she was saying was that she concurred with our HR director in terms of the complexity of administering any new money that we give them. So basically, she was just saying that there are different pay scales and different levels, and while some are hourly, some are salaried. And so she's saying that there is a complexity in trying to figure out how everything gel together, and that she agreed with Shannon all. That's what I mean.
Thank you. And also, I had asked Director Darby to put the pay study that was done for MNPS by the Nashville Public Education Foundation on the SharePoint. So that is available as well. That shows the logic that they went through to get to the pay scale or the pay plan that was recommended to the mayor that we have currently got in front of us. Any other comments or questions on support staff pay? Councilmember Suara.
Thank you. And my question will go to Ms. Frieda. Last time I asked Director All, when she was talking about the complexity and trying to make sure that everything works, if starting mid-year will be an option. I wanted to know, since your HR person is also talking about complexity, if we are able to give you the money and we're able to find the money after the 22 million, is the board okay with coming up with how to do that?
Yes, I think the board is committed into working with a solution that works for everyone, and that, it's an ongoing conversation that we want to sit through with SEIU, with the employees, and with the stakeholders to understand how do we do this efficiently and effectively. But yeah, employee compensation is our number one goal, and we want to work together to make sure we do that and efficient, and that's fiscally responsible. And in that, and make sure that we work with all HR directors and with the employees representation groups to make sure we can find a way to get there.
Other comments? Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Player, for being here. Was there any consideration, I guess, outside of the plan that was sent to the mayor's office that he put into the budget? Was there any consideration or talk prior to that about wanting more funding for support staff, or what was the, I guess, the feeling about dealing with that issue prior to submitting, the play plan to the mayor?
With the board's conversation with the mayor's office about, we've always communicated with the mayor's office that our number one goal and priority was employee compensation. First, starting with teachers and making the best paid teachers in the state, and then moving to support staff immediately afterwards. And so our conversations with the mayor's office was always, our goal was to make sure that we really invest in our employees. And we do that in a systematic way that found a strong foundation that we make up for past years where we did not invest in our employees. But then next, how do we maintain that in a consistent level with the maintenance of effort, that it becomes a standard of that employee compensation is built into our responsibility, our priorities with education of our children, because educating our children is a service, and that we need employees to do that. And so it's a way of doing that in a systematic way that's responsible, but working with the administration in a thoughtful way to do it. And so that's always been part of the conversation. The question is, as tax receipts come in, as we weather COVID, what does that look like? And so that was more the details of what does that look like. But we've always advocated that any new funding will go to employees to make sure our employees are happy and do the tough job that they have to deal with as we deal with state mandates coming down, as we deal with a growing city, as we try to close the learning lab costs. How do we create the best conditions for our students and our employees to do that?
Anyone else? Okay. Councilmember Cash.
I appreciate all this good information. I heard one of your leaders of many of your employees just say that he felt like his group wasn't a part of the process. And I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but taking that lesson, what do you think you could do going forward and better include them and better make them feel like they're included?
I think it's just changing how we do the conversations with the stakeholders. I think we looked at the pay plan as level setting, of looking at what does the market say about our employees, their pay, what does it take to live in Nashville, with that approach, and then from there have a kind of a full thorough discussion of what that looks like, to make sure that we're all working from the same set of numbers. But I know it's important to the board, I know it's important to my colleagues that all stakeholders, especially employees, are brought to the table and have a conversation. We have expressed that to Dr. Battle and her administration. And so I think now that we have a number set and a level set to begin with, I think that allows us to have a more thoughtful discussion, and the board will have a more thoughtful discussion with the employee stakeholders and saying, how do we have this? How do we come to, how do we work through what we're trying to achieve? But I think that was kind of first thing. First, have the information we need, and then have a full thorough discussion of how we want that to look like.
Was there one other hand over here?
CM Toombs.
Councilmember Toombs.
Thank you, Chair. I was just making sure that I understood what's going on in this conversation. So there is an increase in the proposed mayor's budget for support staff. Is that SEIU is advocating for a larger increase?
Correct.
To reach the levels that they feel are appropriate?
Correct.
Okay.
The proposed increase is a 4% COLA plus the steps, and then for 3 categories, nutrition, bus drivers, and paraprofessionals, significant raises that they get them at living wages. And the bus drivers, my understanding is that they asked to be comparable to MTA drivers, and that was granted. That's what's in the current budget.
Correct.
Other questions or thoughts? Okay, those were the items I wanted to make sure we talked about. Are there other questions that people have to raise on other of the items, or any other comments or suggestions? Okay, so I will say again, the goal today is to do 2 things. If in this list of now, we've combined a lot of things that multiple council members had or caucuses had listed separately. So we have in front of us about 55 items, I believe. I can tell you there is not enough funding to do all 55 of those. And it is possible that if the biggest one is our top priority, then that's the only one that will happen. Or we may make the decision to try to do as many as we can, to try to meet as many needs as we can. So I'm hopeful that two things can happen. We can have, for a moment, just a general discussion of perhaps, if, are there one or two things here that rise to the top that we can all agree to? I believe I didn't hear objection when I made the statement that we have to fill the school hole. So that one's there, and in fact, it's not in the list because I didn't want people wasting a vote on that one, because I need to know what should happen after that. There may be a few other things that are that obvious. I doubt it. But if there are, I'd like to hear about them now. And then I would like for us to go to giving everyone the chance to look over this list of 55 and pick your top favorites. And we're going to use the quadratic voting process to do that. There are probably lots of other cool ways to do it, but we're going to be the coolest in the country and do it that way this year. So, but first, just let's say 10 minutes. And I just, any other comments people have about obvious things? And first I'll recognize. So, when we get to the voting, you have what are called 99 voice credits. You could pick all 55 and give them one vote. But if you give something 2 votes, that uses up 4 of your voice credits. So if you give something 2 votes, then you can only vote for 25. But that's the magic of quadratic. You got to really mean it when you vote. I mean, you'll see it when you start doing it. It's actually pretty cool. Yeah, exactly. It calculates, yeah, there's a box here, and it starts, your voice credits start disappearing as you vote on things. So, our friends who I will introduce them in just a moment, our friends from Radical Exchange are running that. It will be, for those who brought laptops, you can do it live. For those of you who don't, you can look on our computers and then go home and do it on your computer at home. Councilmember Mendez. Again, this is a non-binding, it's just a prioritization exercise that will helpful be to me. Councilmember Mendez.
I do think it would be helpful for us to understand how you are going to treat the results, because
That's a mean question, but I will answer it.
you keep reminding us you're an engineer. Like there's some possibility that like whatever the results are, you're like, aha, we got it, and that's what you do.
And I don't have to think at all.
But
it's not going to be that easy.
There's, I don't know. I think that would be helpful for us deciding how to use our votes.
Okay. And Councilmember Rutherford, I'll get to you next. No, I do not have, I do not think there is value to simply looking at how that chart lays things out and then going through it until I run out of money. But I do think, based on all the discussions that we've had, what I've heard both from the public and from my colleagues on the council, when I get to the point where I can't tell from those things how two things compare to each other, I've then got this ranking that will help with that decision. I mean, ultimately, I've got 2 choices to make. One is, how far down the line of all the things we want to do can we provide wonderful things to wonderful departments that deserve it? Because the flip side of that is, how far down the line do I want to go in taking things away from wonderful departments that we would like to be able to do? It will be somewhat subjective, but I'm doing everything I can to take into account all the information that y'all can provide me in any way you can.
And then I have a follow-up that does play to the engineer side. I think there's less than half of us in the room. So I'd be interested in hearing from the folks running the show here. There's got to be some threshold below which the results aren't meaningful. If 39 people vote like they meant it, then it's very meaningful. If 20 people vote, maybe it's not. And I don't know what the threshold is, but I'm interested, because clearly not all 39 are going to do this in a couple hours from now. And
Okay,
I'm
valid
interested,
question.
I'm interested in hearing
All right.
what the participation threshold is.
So with that, I will not wait to introduce our team. I'll go ahead and introduce, okay, Matt and Alex. Matt Pruitt and Alex, I cannot pronounce your last name, are here from Radical Exchange. Thank y'all for making the trip from California. Mr. Shulman, if you'll cede your seat for a moment to Matt and let him. It is nice to have him up here, and I'm sure he'll be back, but Matt, it's probably easier than leaning over trying to talk into that. We appreciate you being here. If you'll, I guess first answer Councilmember Mendez's question about how many does it take to be meaningful, and then maybe if you guys want to go ahead and start explaining the process, then I'll let us do that as well, and we'll keep asking more questions.
Sure. First, thanks for having us. Very honored to be here. We're from Radical Exchange Foundation, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that basically works on innovation in governance and innovation in democratic processes. And we're very happy to be supporting Chair Allen in this process. Basically, I think our job here today is to make the tool available and to help make sure everybody understands exactly how it works, to answer any questions that you have about using it. In answer to the question about what's the sort of threshold at which the results are valid, I think the way to think about that is that the validity of these results is open to Chair Allen's interpretation. So if we get a very low participation rate, then I think Chair Allen should take that into consideration in the results. Our hope is that we'll get most of the potential voters will weigh in by the deadline, and if not, then it should be taken with a grain of salt.
And the link will be sent to all council members, whether you're in the room or not. So those who are not here will have the opportunity to vote as long as they read my email this morning and know to pay attention.
Right.
So, Councilmember Rutherford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question may have been answered, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it anyway, or ask it anyway, just for verification. Is the voting done by any member present, or is this strictly the Budget Committee?
The voting is done by any member of the council who sees the link and chooses to vote between now and 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
Yes, it will stay open until 8 o'clock tonight.
Okay.
Yes. So, Councilmember Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know if you could explain to everybody who paid for Radical Exchange to be present with us today.
I will let Radical Exchange, because I haven't given them a dime. Can y'all explain?
Yeah, we're working pro bono. It's part of our mission as a nonprofit to try to advance methods that we think can help democracy work better. And this is a great opportunity for us to pilot a tool that we think can lead to better group decisions. So that's why we're here.
And then to further answer your question, they have participated in the annual conventions of the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, and talked about how this method could be used for budgets. And one of our budget staff said this might be an interesting tool for us to use. So we were put together and we agreed it might be an interesting pilot. We could both learn something from it, and hopefully we will learn something from it, and hopefully it will help us. Councilmember Hancock and then Bradford. My question has been answered, thank you. Okie dokie, Councilmember Bradford.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to circle back to earlier comments about contracts and with Dell. I just wanted to ask a question about that.
Okay.
After last year's budget, I had conversations with then interim director Zeitlin about this, and my understanding of that from that conversation was that for the last several years, Dell has not asked for their money. But then Director Darby just said that they have asked for their money. So can we get something sent to us from either council office or from finance showing when and how much Dell has asked for, so that we can verify? And then also follow up is who within Metro is verifying that Dell is honoring their side of the agreement?
Ms. Darby, can I give you that homework assignment?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you. It sounds like we've decided that the $22 million hole in MNPS's budget is a given. So how much money, it helps me to sort of get it into my brain, how much money do we have to play with? And that way I can look at this list and it makes it easier for me to prioritize. So what have you identified, or what's our pool of money that we have to pull from over and above the 22 million?
That is an excellent question, and that goes to the other question of how deep are we willing to go into other departments? Do we want to continue to raid? I mean, I think some of us are more comfortable raiding some departments than others, but ultimately it gets down to MNPD, parks. I've looked at codes. I've looked at NDOT. I mean, basically all the big departments are getting something upwards of 50 employees. None of them smile when I ask them if what it will do. So that being said, give me a second, I'll pull up my spreadsheet. I mean, it is largely a function of how much havoc you want to wreak on the other departments.
Sure.
Hang on, let me get my spreadsheet up. So let me get my summary up. There's that one. When you add all the things that we're talking about here together, it comes out to about $17 million. And the only way to get $17 million is to start raiding departments and taking away things that we have given them to provide services that we think they need. I will say there's probably, I believe, maybe another 10 million that's out there that would not create total havoc.
So 10 million is the easier number?
That's the easier
swallow?
number. There's another 7 million that is not easy, but
Okay,
it's
would it be
theoretically
possible to add, because I think it might be helpful to you, but my brain doesn't work like your brain does, but just a suggestion is if maybe adding a question to the quadratic, maybe not to the quadratic, but just asking the question of, are you comfortable pulling money from parks? Are you comfortable pulling money from NDOT? Are you, those types of things to see where the comfort level is for each of these departments? Because some of us feel more comfortable about other departments than others.
pulling from others.
So I don't know, maybe it would be helpful to me, but I don't know.
That's an excellent question. I may huddle up with those guys while people are looking at their computers and see if that can be done. Actually, they're there. Let me ask them that question. Is it possible I could give you 6 more questions and have a second poll added?
I think that would be possible. Yeah, it would have to be a separate poll, and I think that would make a lot of sense, like was suggested, to get an idea of what people's preferences are for funding sources as well as funding destinations.
Okay.
I will say, though, that I just want to make sure that we don't sort of send another email that confuses, particularly the people that aren't here. The more emails we send, the more questions there might be about, wait a minute, what's going on here exactly? I think there's a pretty good argument to be made for sticking with the choices that we've got now and interpreting those,
An alternative is to do the old-fashioned, let's raise our hands and talk about it on the funding sources before we leave.
And that's fine. If I didn't know we wanted to spend that much time on it, because that can get a little emotional and heated.
That it can. But I think that's a worthy question, so I appreciate you doing that, and we may circle back around to that shortly. Councilmember Nash.
I was wanting to know the link.
The link will be sent to you.
It was sent from Alex Radical about 5:05.
Okay. Well, you should have an email to you that specifically says, yeah. Alex, have you sent it yet?
I did send it, and
Okay.
after Matt has, when
we're
we're
not
ready to
quite ready.
start voting, we'll make sure that everybody's received it, make sure that it's all working, and I'll go around and,
Gotcha. We're not to
correct
that point
any
yet, but
questions.
yeah, it should be in your email box at this point already. Let's see, Councilmember Toombs and then Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've got an answer to my question, but the suggestion of some of those FTEs that are in the proposed budget, starting those mid-year to save some money, has that been considered?
Yes, that has been considered. There are 2 considerations that that will be part of the discussion that I have with the OMB when they start crunching numbers. One is that if we start it in a partial year, then we'll have to, fully fund it the following year.
Right.
So that's just something to keep in mind. It obligates us to a larger number next year, which we may not want to do. They said, yes, you can do that. They did not advocate for saying, let's just have all 500 start in November, which I thought was a great idea. They said that would be incredibly difficult to run through the budget, that it would make more sense to be a little more precise with that. So perhaps to identify which ones we're starting possibly later.
Okay.
So it's possible on a small scale. It is not recommended on larger scale. Anybody behind me want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the preference from departments would be to look at it more programmatically than FTE-esque. So instead of, as you just articulated, instead of every position being delayed for fill-in-the-blank months, does it make sense for this new program that we're contemplating to be delayed in all those related positions for a period of time versus another program? And it's that, I'm not gonna lie, that's a lift to execute, to have a substitute by Thursday, because that's position by position, ins and outs. So that's dicey.
And Chair, do you have a ballpark for that number included in your 10 million estimate, or is that not part of that?
That is essentially $2 million in FTE reductions one way or another.
Okay.
I saw Councilmember Parker. I think.
Thank you. I've got just like two technical questions about the voting system. One, is this a secret ballot? And two, is it worth trying to do it on an iPhone?
You should be able to do it on an iPhone, yeah. And it's this is a secret ballot. I mean, the way that we'll do it is mirror the results to Chair Allen. If there's any questions about auditing it, we can do that. We have all the information.
Sure, I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, and the plan is, tomorrow theoretically we have one more meeting at 4:30, so we'll have that information available tomorrow. But just, Can you mail yours in? Sure. You can drop it in a Dropbox. Okay, Councilmember Welsh. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Welsh and then Councilmember Hurt. And then.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about potential available pots of money. At our meeting last week, I know Ms. Flannery said that debt service was pretty much off limits, but I'm kind of wondering why, because given in the budget there is debt service funds, I think about 50 million for projects that are as yet unfunded, capital projects that may not be funded, or maybe we can perhaps push those off and use some of that money for existing needs right now. And I'm just wondering why we're treating that particular pot of money as so sacrosanct.
Thank you.
When it's
I'm
not
going to let the finance director.
Sure. So that is approved projects, and a portion of that is spent money. So if you'll recall, the practice is that we approve the CSP and then we use commercial paper to fund those projects as need comes. So right now we have about $350 million spent, projects done, shovels happened, ribbons cut, all of that, as well as we have about $1.2 billion in approved projects that are in different forms and fashions of being built. We're contemplating a $650 million issuance, so 350 of that would pay off what we've already borrowed. 300 is for those projects that we expect to get us through this construction cycle into early calendar year 2024. So this, if you want to go back and amend CSPs and remove projects, you could do that for the 300 million of the 650, but the 350 you've already spent. So this is locking in lower interest rates that we would have done later in the calendar year, but you gotta at least pay the 350. If you don't want to build anything else going forward, that's a conversation that we could have. That would be very challenging, but we could have that conversation.
But it is possible that we could decide we wanted to push off some of these projects for a while and use some of those funds.
So the way we
could do that
projects is we don't fund it by debt cycles. So the 350 that's been drawn before doesn't mean each project is at start or completion. So you could have a project where we funded, half of it, but the rest of it still has to be built, and we got to borrow the money for that portion. So it'd be very difficult to just turn off the spigot, because you have projects in all different levels of design, construction, completion. It would not be something, and a lot of this is just ongoing sidewalks, you know, the regular kind of keep the lights on type capital costs. These aren't, you know, the shopping malls. These are the ongoing ones.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to find any dollars that could be available, because I think there's so many things that are very important right now that we fund, and I just cannot see us like not supporting the schools and not supporting this increase in pay plan and things like that for the support staff. It's so important, and so I any place we can find money, I'd like to take advantage of it. So thank you.
It might be worth just doing one more, like set the table where we left off last week, where we are today, because I'm not sure if people's weekend memories may have left them. But as it relates to the 22.6, like I said, we've identified 8 million in fund balance for non-recurring costs that we're comfortable using. Schools had already done the 5.5 because they moved textbooks onto some federal ESSER funding. They've gone back and found what they expect, about another 2 million. So we've got about 7.5 contribution from schools, the 8 we've found. So we're really solving for, in the general operating budget, 7 million is kind of that nut we're trying to solve for, which sounds like a lot, but in a $3 billion budget, you know, we kind of squirreled that away for your asks anyways before we knew this 22 was coming. What the struggle is, what do you want to add on top of that? So this 22, this is something we don't normally do, right? Like normally you guys get your wish list and we have a little kitty. This is, we've spent the kitty and you still have a wish list. And that's why this is a little bit more of a struggle.
Yeah. So Councilmember Hurt, you had a question a while back, and Mendez, and you're next. And then Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have several. I'd like to know, because I know that a lot of council members have added things. Are any of those wishes on the wish list a wish for the departments? Meaning, is the department looking for it, or can there be an elimination?
There are a few wishes that when I checked with the department, they said, actually, we're not really in a position to use this yet. We appreciate it, but there are other things we're going to have to get to first. Sure, I'm happy to do that.
So therefore, can that be eliminated in order to help us come around with that number? Right.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
You can fight for them.
Okay.
I will say, Director Pogue is ready to have the Director of Entertainment and know what to do with that. He's not quite ready for the other 2 positions that were requested for that. So that was one feedback that I got. Mr. Penn in codes says that he is, can I tell you what number that is? Yes.
The Office of Film.
All right, I'm going to slow up. That was, it was 225 million, 225,000. Let me get to the list that y'all are looking at.
Right, number 6, 6 down. 6 down, Office of Music, Film, and Entertainment.
Correct. No.
Is it the 125 or the 100,000?
No, we have in the budget already in the mayor's office a director of, that's not showing here because it's not a wish list item. And then, right, and then there's a 1 to 2 FTEs in the mayor's office of economic development. Hold on.
So that's neither one of those. So the 100 and the 125.
And the office of music, film, and entertainment.
So neither one of those he's prepared for, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
The 125 and the 100 and 125.
That is correct. Thank you. Okay. And I spoke with Mr. Penn in codes, who understands that we desperately want someone to go out at night. He still has great concerns about security, even with policemen. He said, I've actually got some folks that do that in a stealth way at the end of their day that he will work to make that more effective. But would prefer to just have more codes people in general as opposed to the co-response. And we are giving him 3 more standards inspectors. No, I consolidated it
On which
into,
page?
it should just be on one place now.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe that was the cost of it, and it was 3 departments added together, but I didn't do that. Was that this exact same amount in all 3 departments?
It was all 3 added that makes it
Okay, so my apologies, it only shows up in one place now under police, and I did not understand that.
It should be in fire.
But it's not.
It's not.
In this combined list, which I think is what people are looking at, it only showed up in one place. And I did not know that I should have combined those 3 amounts, but if we are taking it out, anyway. Councilmember, let's see.
I'm not done, Councilor, yeah. So are those the only 3 items?
I'm still working my way through.
Okay.
I have not heard back from the other questions I have asked. The departments were enthusiastic about. Anna Harutinen, however you say her name, at NASA was they able to use anything that was given to her. That was one of the ones I checked on. So those are the 2 that I have down as department chairs appreciative but not ready to use yet. So that's a good question.
Okay, so.
I'm answering Councilmember Hurt's questions.
Right. So the other question I had is in regards to departments that are willing to pay for searches or for studies, if they have funds to do external work that we have departments internally that can be done, could some of those funds be eliminated and used for some other purposes?
There are several items in here that involve, and I will say this, there are several items that are one-time items that can be paid for by one-time funding, so those don't necessarily cut into the departments in the way that some of the other ones do.
May I add that we've already grabbed all of those. So we've pulled all of those out and we're using that as non-recurring revenue and justifying using fund balance to supplement it.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because I'm aware that the Library Foundation is looking to have an external search for its new director. And if those funds are available from them, but we have several requests that are here for the public library, and I'm just wondering if it's any ways funds could be used for that purpose and not necessarily, especially considering that we have a very capable human resource office that I know performed an amazing search for the audit director.
I thought you were going to say me.
That too. Can you speak to where funding shows up in this budget for external searches? Is that a line item in the budget already?
I think HR, and we'll go back and confirm, but I think they have a recurring funding request for the outside searches that they do. I mean, I think they share, depending on the subject matter, they kind of divide which consultant they're going to go to. You know, they do the bulk of them internally. I don't know if they have the library director on their list. We can for sure check.
We'll check on that. Anything else, Councilmember Hurt? Councilmember Suara?
On the library, on this list, there are a couple of items for the library that does not have a council member name attached to it, so I wonder where those came from.
I believe that I had thought those were all under minority caucus. So there is security staffing, extended hours for the library,
So we only have the parking, the library parking.
and the additional slots for NASA. Those don't have an owner? Okay.
And one other question,
Councilmember Hurt.
We Go Transit, I see that there's a $10 million allocation. Is that a wish from them?
No, I spoke with them this afternoon. They would love to have it. It is federal money that they can, that if we gave them another 10 million, they could use that for capital to buy new things, but it is available for them to use for operating, and that is what they're currently doing. So they can operate without that.
Right, because I know that there's some other federal funding available.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Mendez.
So can we take that off?
Sure.
Thank you.
That is under We Go. So, yeah, O'Connell request. Okay, all right. I'll come back to you on that one. Councilmember Mendez.
Thanks. I wanted to swing back by the secret ballot concept.
Okay.
Our
Put your
votes,
head on your desk.
our votes are not public records, never going to be available.
No, they'll be available tomorrow.
All right.
With names attached to them? Like, so everybody knows how everybody voted?
No. Again, let me defer to Matt on that one. What will be available tomorrow is a bar chart that says lots of people voted for this and not many people voted for that. The results will be public. Am I saying that correctly, Matt?
Correct. The sum will be public and the individual ballots will be private.
We need to, the individual ballots will need to be public as well.
Okay, well, I mean, that's doable as well.
Okay.
That's doable as well, yeah.
So not secret ballot.
Not secret ballot.
All right.
Don't put your head on your desk. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you for your flexibility. Okay, great. Next is Councilmember Johnston. I got you.
Thanks. I just wanted, since Mr. Freeman's study that came up with $9 million was done separately and not in conjunction with anything else, have we verified that, is that a real number? Has anybody, I hope you don't take that as ugly. I'm just making sure that, is 9 million the real number? Is it more, is it less to achieve what you're trying to achieve? Has that been cross-referenced by finance or human resources or any of that?
I will say that I have put on the SharePoint the pay plan study that was paid for by the Nashville Public Education Foundation that provides, I guess, another way to look at that. And then I'm going to let Mr. Freeman respond if he'll share the microphone with Matt there.
I just wanted to clarify a couple things that were said earlier about this. The pay study that you're talking about did not ask the question of how much it costs to live in the city of Nashville. That is not what the study did. And it did not seek to achieve living wages. So the number, what I explained earlier, I think, was that the number was created because we started by saying, what did teachers get last year, right? If you make $24,000 and a person who makes 50 gets $7,000, you're looking up and saying, well, why do I not get $7,000? And so we started there, but the MIT living wage calculator that Metro government uses to set their wage level at a minimum says that you need $35,000. So it does not. I mean, you need actually more money than that. You're still going to have thousands of people not making living wages. And I just want to clarify, Chair Allen, that when you said that, you sort of said that the mayor's investment in paraprofessionals and food service workers gets them to living wages. It does not. That is not what it does. It does for bus drivers. It does not for food service or paraprofessionals. Not for everyone.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to. If you were referencing me, I don't know if you were, but I'm not saying that. I'm not saying what your goals were. I'm saying, has anyone within Metro that would you should have been a part of the process in the
Yeah.
first place, is what I'm saying, so that everybody would have been on the same page. So this $9 million that comes out, everybody can say, yeah, that $9 million makes sense for what you're trying to do. We want to do this, it's going to cost $9 million. Has that been verified by finance or HR or anybody? That's all, that's.
Councilmember Swear.
Thank you, Chair. The email from MMPS did say that they estimated that the proposal will cost an additional 10 million.
So it's actually 10 million instead of 9 million to
That's
achieve his
that's
goals.
what MMPS estimated it to be, so.
Ms. Frida? Yes, is that a nod? You can just yes. 10? Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that we were everybody's on the same page. Thank you.
Councilmember Gamble.
Yes, on the first page, there's a line item under police for school safety study, but at the end it says take off list. Should we be taking that off? Did I miss something?
That is correct. That was a late request. So school safety study on the first page.
Okay, thank you.
And let's see, I had Councilmember Hancock next.
Before we logged into our special quiz, you mentioned how we seem to have consensus that we should fund the MMPS shortfall. Does everyone at home that's participating in this until 8 o'clock at night know that? Should we still vote on it, not vote on it?
It
How do
was
we use our
supposed to
points?
be removed. Is it still there for $17.6 million?
It's still on our papers. I'm scrolling through the list now.
I think it's not on the electronic version.
It's on page 2.
But yes, the consensus is not to spend your votes on that one because they're precious.
After Nash, Chair.
And then my other question was, one of the items that I had submitted, the beautification fund, we had previously had 3 different suggestions for funding, and now there's just one.
Correct. I'd combined those because there was only a difference of whether it was 105 or, and
But there are
some.
3 different sources, and this says self-insured liability fund.
Well, again, I apologize. I meant to put all 3 of those as an either or because ultimately
You'll decide that later.
we'll decide that. We'll decide that based on the discussion that Councilmember Johnston has asked us to have if we continue to have time.
Thank you.
Good question. Councilmember Swope.
Thanks. So, just for everybody watching at home, sitting in their Barca lounger, or watching this at their computer desk, let's come back to the MMPS $22.6 million, and let me walk through this and make sure that I'm right, or at least in my head, I'm right. Out of the 22.6 original money, we've actually added 9 million to that for support staff, correct?
Not to that. That's a separate discussion.
Okay, so let's go back to the 22.6.
Okay.
The schools have actually found 7.5 million out of their existing budget, correct?
That is correct.
So that leaves us a hole of 15.1.
I think
You with me?
that's-
Yeah, 22.6 minus 7.5 is 15.1. We have identified 8 million out of the fund balance that can be used for
Out
this.
of one-time uses.
I keep looking back at finance here. You can just nod. And that's good. I'm just trying to get a schedule going here, which basically leaves, well, it's 15.1 minus 8, 7.1.
7.
Am I correct? Mm-hmm. Now, that's what we're trying to find here?
No. That has been done. We passed that list out and talked about it.
No, I'm looking at it right
Yeah,
here.
that's correct.
And that's where my next question was. It's coming from benefits, MTA, MMPD, fire, library, parks, and NDOT, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that accounts for the 22.6. The 9 million is new in addition to this?
That is correct.
All right, so total for schools, we got to find outside of the MNPS budget is 17.6 million, which is the singular number back here, 17.063?
No, that should just be scratched out.
Okay. All right.
That's the 9.
So the 9 million is a separate discussion that we have not settled, but thank you for making that clarification.
Yeah,
which one should
I'm
we
trying to
scratch
sort it all out in my own head here.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
Councilmember, is this related to that?
No.
Okay, then I'm going to recognize Councilmember Nash and then the Vice Chair.
Is the 8 o'clock time limit tonight in concrete? I have a commitment after this, not that my one vote in this survey is going to mean a lot, but I wonder if we might be able to extend it to
Midnight, I can't stay up that late. Yes, you did, and I'm gonna get up at 4, but.
Can we get the idea, maybe you suggest that we get technical?
I will, no, these guys can do
explanation
whatever
so
we
that
ask them
can
to,
go,
and
we
they're
can
on
go.
California time, but I will defer to the will of the body, but I would beg you not to make it midnight. Would 9 or 10 o'clock work for y'all?
Well, we have to finish by 8 because the people at home have to.
The people at home will have to get the message that, I mean, we've sent that out. Our hope is if you have a laptop with you, because I ask you to bring your laptops, that you can vote before you go, or you can use my laptop, or you can run upstairs and use the laptop.
And so
10, all right, do we have a consensus? Can you guys shift it to 10?
we can change the closing time, yes. And one other comment is I would like to, I think that, again, sort of, I want to create clarity for the members who are not here voting. So I think it would be good to send them a consolidated email, communicating any changes that we make here today.
Okay.
So in other words, the change in the time and if there are some of the ballot items that have been stricken that they shouldn't vote for, we should communicate that to them too.
That sounds great, we'll do that. Time change and items eliminated, I think that's good. Time, 10 o'clock. Okay, that is great. Let me, I think I've got a whole new list. So Councilmember Toombs.
Thank you, Chair. Another item that can come off the list is the low cap payments for Bordeaux and Knowles, the $2,739,750. That is a retirement benefit payment. That is the responsibility of the hospital authority. I do want colleagues to keep in mind that because that is the responsibility of the hospital authority, the subsidy, the $54 million that's proposed to go to the hospital authority, this $2.7 million has to come out of that. So that's $2.7 million that is not going to the operation of Nashville General Hospital. And per their chief financial officer, they have a $2 million shortfall.
That's page 1.
Yep, towards the bottom.
Thank you. All right, we'll go over this before we, thank you for that, Councilmember Toombs. Councilmember Johnston.
I have a question and then a comment. Are we going to do a hand raise for the source of funds question, or are you going to put that in a separate quadratic, whatever?
We are not going to put that in a separate quadratic.
Okay, so we're
We
going
don't
to
want
hand raise.
the issue. That's
Okay,
correct.
okay. I still have concerns about the $9 million piece of this with the support staff, and I'm not quite. I want to pay the support staff. I think that's important to increase pay. I just am questioning the methodology of it because I know that, and I don't know what the method is when HR and finance and everybody gets together and they do their thing, but because the SEIU was not part of that discussion when this was being put together, there's probably conflicting methodologies. So I'm wondering if a better way to handle it, because I don't know that anybody can argue against increased pay for support staff, but I'm wondering for it to make sense within an operating budget that typically has a method, and pay studies and all that kind of stuff has a method. I'm wondering if a mid-year, I'm just wondering the best way to handle it, because what I have a feeling is that if we vote for the 9 million, we'll give them the 9 million and they will have a cluster to try to figure out how to equitably handle that among job codes and this and that and the other. It may, like she was saying, the HR would say it's going to be a little bit difficult to sort of figure that out because it was done separately. So I'm not saying do anything. I'm just commenting that I think that this could be a little bit, we could be causing problems and with the best of intentions, unintended consequences. So I'm just wondering if there's a way for everybody to come to the table that's in this space and come up with a firm number and a firm methodology and who's going to get paid what and why and all that and the equity piece of it so that everybody is on the same page, because we have had an outside group that should have been at the table that wasn't at the table when this was come up. I've said that 3 times now, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure that's something we can do between now and again, I will refer people to the NPEF's pay study, not to say that it achieved the goal that Mr. Freeman has said was his goal, but that it was done through a process more similar to what we've seen from our finance director. So Councilmember Cash and then Suara.
I understand Councilmember Johnson's frustration or wanting to seek clarity on, and kind of seek clarity on how it's going to play out. I am comfortable giving $9 million for support staff, and I have faith that if we give them $9 million for support staff, the school board will be able to work it out.
Thank you for that statement. Councilmember Suara.
Thank you. I echo that statement because we don't tell them how to spend it anyway. They usually have to figure it out themselves. So let's give it to them and let them work it out. I wanted to point out a couple of things. The Community Oversight Board is here 3 times. And so there's an overlap between all 3. So as people are voting, you cannot vote for all 3. So wanted to clear that. And then for Councilmember Welch, the ILS program, which is the $2 million that you have at the on the last page, my understanding is that there is something that is comparative that the administration is looking into, the non-law enforcement piece of the co-response, and they're working on that, and they have federal funding to look into that and do that. So I think with that information, I want to suggest that maybe this is something, the $2 million, that we can take off for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll go over the list that we have stricken at the end, just to be sure everybody's clear on that, and we'll send that out in the email. Well, I think explaining that the COB is a choice of which level of funding do you want to give them, I think that's a fair way to do that. Other questions on that? I think we agreed to have a hopefully not too extended discussion on the possible funding sources, and to get a bit of a feel from council members how deep we're willing to go and where we think that should come from. I will start with the easy one. We did vote on adjusting our recapture rate, and that gave us $940,000 that's not allocated anywhere. So free money, we got that. So just celebrate that one. I will run through my list and then ask people to add other things, and then Councilmember Hurt.
I don't have a question, but I do have a statement in regards to the additional money that we give to MNPS. I am all for making sure that our schools are well-funded and have everything that they need, but I do think that there should be some accountability in terms of that, because we provide them with funds and we want to make sure that they are paying the staff the adequate amounts that should be paid. So I just want to make sure that that is actually stated in there, because I don't want them to think that anytime they have a shortfall, that Metro is always going to be the place for them to come and get it filled.
Okay, that statement is on the record, and then I will remind you that we give them their bottom line, and they do with it as they choose. But
and I understand that. Yeah. I know that's it, but there should be some accountability on what they do with it, because I mean, schools has received quite a bit of money from CARES Act money, and I know all of it has been specifically designated, but with that, it seems to me that there should be some savings somewhere with all of the additional funds that have been received, and we ought to be able to work through it in a way where we all are making sure that every employee in Metro Schools is paid fairly.
Thank you. Councilmember Bradford.
Thank you. I had a question and a comment. The question is about the system we're going to be voting with. Are we able to, before we do our final submission, change, like if we're going through and decide, oh, well, I want to vote on this, but I'm out of voices, I can go back and adjust.
Yes.
That.
There's a plus and a minus.
Second, as we were going through here, marking stuff, and you were mentioning you had spoken with some department heads about needs. I just wanted to throw the comment out there that on page 2, basically the 2 other items that I had put on. So the second line is the animal behavior specialist and pet foster. Those are 2 specific asks made by the director of Metro Animal Care Control. So those are two things that they are in dire need of and would love to have if we can fund it. And then further down, the one additional paid day off for 10-month employees for MMPS, that figure and that ask came directly from school board member Masters. So I
Thank you for
wanted to
that.
put that out there for anybody else who's making the decisions.
Okay? Any other comments? So before we go over the things that we've stricken, if we can go through funding sources, and then we'll end with going back through and making sure we're all clear on what's been taken off the list, and then get the instructions on how to vote. Councilmember Suara.
Councilmember Welch, can we take off the 10% COLA for MMPS that is supposed to come from debt service? Yes. Thank you.
That is on the page 2.
I'll run through all that we're taking off.
Okay. I'll come back to you on that one. Don't let me forget. I'm sure you won't. Okay, so let's try in 10 or 15 minutes to go through possible funding sources and get a feel for which ones we prefer over others, and then we'll get instructions on how to vote. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, so I'm just gonna, these are not in any particular order except how they show up on my spreadsheet, and people can suggest others at the end. And these are basically taken from the funding sources that people have suggested. They've just landed in my spreadsheet in this order. The Small Business Incentive Fund was $250,000. That was one request. I have talked to Director Pogue, and he does feel like he's going to be able to very effectively use that this year, and would request that we not wipe that out. Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you. I initially submitted that to cover Nashville grad, because the Nashville grad program, which was funded at $1 million last year, was cut to $500,000 for 2023 budget, even though they spent, well, the actuals haven't come in yet. They had already spent over $600,000, and they're projected to spend $750,000. This Nashville grad program is a stipend program for students that need it. As you know, Tennessee Promise pays for tuition, but it doesn't cover books and technology fees and laptops and things like that that students need to be successful. So this Nashville grad provides a stipend so that students can purchase those things. And talking with the president, Dr. Shana Jackson, they are projecting that as enrollment goes back up, they had a decrease in enrollment, of course, for the last 2 years because of COVID. But as enrollment starts to gain, and with the addition of a new campus in Madison, they are projecting that they will need that $1 million for these students. Now, the Nashville Small Business Incentive Program is a very important program as well. It provides grants to small businesses that hire employees. I don't remember the number of employees you have to, similar to the Amazon and Dell contracts, but it's for small businesses. That program has been previously funded, I believe at $500,000, but they only spent $150,000 last year. So it is in the line item for this year at $500,000, and Director Pogue does believe that they will be able to spend that money. But that was the initial reason why I suggested taking $250 from that $500, which would have given them $250, and that would have still increased the Small Business Incentive Program budget by $150,000, more than what they spent last year. However, since then, Councilmember Suara has come up with another resource a funding source rather, that funding in order to get Nashville grad back up to the 1 million, taking the 500,000 out of another source, which I think is a better suited place, and I'll let her speak to that.
Okay, and I'll probably get to it in a minute. The next item I have on my list is one that I will just say our finance director does not approve of, but will allow, which is to take our 4% fund, which currently is funded at 5%, and consider that as an option. However, we should know that when it comes time in July, and then again at the end of the year, to fund libraries and IT and things like that, we will have reduced what they want. There are 135 different requests or for money that will only fund about 40 of those. So that theoretically, there's $8,000 available for that, but every dollar we take from that means something else that a department desperately wants will have to wait longer. So I just throw that out there as a caveat. Councilmember Johnston, on this?
Yes, I just want to piggyback on that, the 4% fund, or I'm going to call it the 5% fund, is constantly used as just take it from that, just take it from that. And I'm glad we're pointing out that recurring revenues can't be paid with expenses cannot be paid with non-recurring funds. Anyway, I just want people to know that our departments, we have like $135 million in requests from different departments to come out of that fund right now. So that 5% that by charter, we're supposed to have 4%, that 5% doesn't even come close to that. So when we talk about, when we send departments questions and, hey, can I get this? Hey, can I get that? And a lot of times that comes from the 4% fund. So the more we pull from that, the less ability we have to do those on the fly type things that mean a lot to our constituents, because it's 100% constituent driven when we say, hey, parks, can you do this? Or, hey, Metro Animal Control, can you do this? A lot of times it comes for that. So it shouldn't be just a given that we're pulling from that. It's quite dangerous. I think we need to have way more than even 5%, based off of an almost $3 billion budget. But I just wanted to put that out there, that it's a little bit irresponsible to have this constantly coming up as a source of funds.
Thank you. I will say that's our biggest one. So if we cut that, it dramatically limits what we will be doing. Councilmember Soar.
No, I think you said 800,000. I was saying it's
8 million. Sorry, 8 million. Thank you. Correct me whenever I do that. Okay, I have right now
Hey,
2.1
can I just
million.
make a quick comment?
Yes, please do.
It's more like 10 million,
But didn't we already raid 2 million?
Well, that's what I wanted to point out. So what we had included in this budget that was special and unique, and we probably didn't do a great enough job highlighting it when we did it, but now that we're taking it out, we're highlighting it. We had added almost $1 million in police and $1 million in fire in their operating budget for kind of their ongoing equipment needs, so that we wouldn't have to put it into the 4% every year. And as part of that $7 million that we're solving for schools, we've taken that back out of their budget. So I guess you could argue you can't miss what you never had, but we've already kind of hit the equipment note for $2 million. And I would also add, it's not an either or, it's not 4% or 5%. So if you're really passionate about hitting that spot, you don't have to take the full 1%. It could be a space between. I'd still like it not to be anything, but just.
There we are. We'll keep looking for what we do like. The next one that I think should be allowed is self-insured liability. We have said we don't like it, but there's about $1 million out there that still keeps us within actuarial requirements. We have already taken, I believe, $320,000 out for the MNPS hole, which leaves us with about $684,000 that theoretically is available for this. Not massive, but there. And then same thing on judgment losses. We've already taken $300,000 out for the MNPS hole, but that leaves us about $700,000 for that one. Anybody hate that one? Okay. So so now we have 3 easy ones that together still add up to less than $3 million. We have already rated Greenways Police for the MNPS, so that one's not really out there. We have the chamber contract that some people, we have taken $500,000 of the $1 million that was allocated for 14 new Greenways Police, Parks Police, and asked if perhaps we can go ahead and fund 7 and figure we'll get the other 7 as soon as the funds become available. Parks did not love that. Greenways does not love it, but that was their contribution to solving the MNPS hole. Chamber contract has been suggested. That's $175,000. I will say again that Director Pogue has said that serves his needs very significantly, and it would leave him with a significant hole that he doesn't feel like he could fill better with hiring his own people. He says that's got a great return on it. He would like to keep it. I'm just throwing that out there because I know other people have other thoughts. that is associated with job increases and increase in membership. Any other comments on that one? There was $100,000 from the Sportsplex that we don't know who threw that out there or what it was. No one knows. And so I'm going to say, forget that one. We have $285,000 from the police crime prevention. That is, I think, a reduction in the number of positions they have for that. They did speak on the importance of being able to deter crime by doing precision policing, but that's, at this point, I have spent a fair amount of time just looking at, we have 500 new positions in this budget, which is fantastic. It means an increase in services, and they are all things that we have put off. And so this is, I'm just going to say, this is the choice we have before us. Either we begin to raid positions that are going to add services, or we don't provide things that we think are important. So it's just helpful to me to hear from y'all how those things stack up. Councilmember Hancock and then Johnson.
Is it correct that we do not need to vote for the raises for school board, even though they really deserve them, because that won't come up until the budget cycle next year?
I have been trying to get clarification from HR people on how that process works. My understanding is that elected officials have to work through the Metro pay plan process, and we can't change one category without changing the entire group. So I think what you said is correct. I'm going to ask Ms. Darby to help me with that.
The pay for school board members does need to go through the pay plan process, meaning a study would need to be done. It needs to go to Civil Service Commission for approval before it then goes into effect. The last time we did this was right after the charter was amended to set these salaries, and that was back in 2004. And a study was done at that time, and the $14,000 number was determined, and it's been in effect ever since, and is part of the pay plan that will be approved at the next meeting, if it gets approved at the next meeting.
So we can make a statement and start those wheels turning, but you're right, that wouldn't happen. So if that's something we want to strike so people don't waste votes on it, that's a good point. Councilmember Nash, did the 10 o'clock extension work for you? Or are you going to be able? Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay. All right, so that is on the second page, close to the bottom. I think it shows up in gray. So that's an item that we can't do. Councilmember Johnston, I think we're still talking about funding sources.
Yep, we're talking about funding sources, and we were talking about FTEs, because there's a ton of departments that are adding a ton of FTEs, and yet we still have a ton of open positions right now that we're having a hard time filling. And I think the reason we're having those hard time filling them is because we don't pay very well. So I think that some of those can be pushed to mid-year, and I think that would make a lot of sense, except for those departments that have a really long recruiting pipeline, where they can't even start recruiting or training before. I think we explained this as it relates to the police. They can't even put it out there, hey, we're hiring, and then the whole thing lasts months and months and months before they're actually quote-unquote filled, even though they're in the academy or whatever their process is. So I would say, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to add 30 positions when you have 20 open positions still already right now, when it would probably take you that long to fill, 6 months to fill it anyway, if that makes any sense, just sort of like stagger that.
So, yeah, and many of these are very specific positions. I mean, I would say, even within the police, there are some positions that are not officers. They're other things, like the crime prevention lab, for example, which Councilmember Pulley has spoken eloquently for, and I totally understand that. So, to run, I will just say, I went through and lined up all the departments in order of their budget size and number of FTEs added. This may be useful information. So let me just do that real quick, since we've kind of gotten to that part. Police has 2,000 FTEs. There are 193 currently vacant, but that is, as you've mentioned, part of that. They asked for 104 new FTEs. Of that 104 that they requested, they got 68. Do we think there may be a few there that we would be willing to cut? That's one of the questions. I'm going to run through these top 6 departments, and then maybe we kind of talk about if we are comfortable with any of those departments. No one is going to like this, and again, we may decide we need to keep all these and we're not able to give the school raise, but that's the choice I think we have to make. Fire has 1,368 budgeted FTEs. They have 24 vacancies. They asked for 153. They got 94. NDOT has 70 vacancies. I'm not sure what their total is. They asked for 65 new positions. They got 48. The sheriff's office asked for 39 new positions, but those are all taking over Metro's security. So that's just changing a contract into people. So I don't think we have a choice there. And then parks, we've already talked about, has a number of vacancies. Some of that number is a function of their seasonal workers. So that vacancy number is not a true indication of what they haven't been able to fill. They were allowed 50 new FTEs, and we have already rated 7 of theirs. And then General Services has 123. They asked for 14, and they got 12. So those are kind of the departments that have the largest budgets and the largest numbers of employees. 2 more. Codes asked for 31 new positions. They were allowed 31 new positions. Those are all badly needed for speeding up the development process as well as responding to codes complaints. And planning has 59 budgeted positions. There are 8 vacant, but they are being actively recruited. They asked for 25 new positions and got 23 of those. And we have requests for filling in those last 2. Yeah. And then finally, social services has 145 budgeted positions. They have 15 new positions allowed. Most of those are associated with what will become the Office of Homeless Services. So that's just kind of to give context on where the bulk of that's about 370 of the new positions that we looked at. Councilmember Hancock.
My apologies if you've already covered this, but the MC3 Music City Construction Careers is listed twice, once on page 3, 4th from the bottom, and then once on page 1, 6 from the bottom, and it's the same
thing. It should only be on there once. Councilmember Sepulveda, can you speak to which department it fits under and if it's doing something that the department itself doesn't do?
Yes. So this is really workforce development, and I'm going to be in talks with MAG to see if we could get this permanently funded throughout our budget. But basically, it allows people going through the program to earn while they learn. They receive college credit, they graduate debt-free, and they go straight into an apprenticeship program where the average pay is $18.70. So they're averaging between $40,000 and $70,000 a year plus benefits. And we've had multiple constituents, if you've been invited to the graduations, that have gone through the program. I think it's important that we find non-traditional routes for people because some people choose not to go to college. I think this is an appropriate and beneficial way to build up our workforce in union apprenticeship programs.
And it should be listed, I think, under MAC. That's where most of the workforce development happens. So scratch it on the first page under social services.
And use the last one.
And leave it under MAC.
Thank you.
That's correct. Thanks for pointing that out. Councilmember Hurt.
Yes, I too had made a request for workforce development under the Metro Action Commission for pretty much the same reasons that Councilmember Sepulveda had requested, and I didn't know the name of the other organization, but I did have one identified, and that other 50,000 was to be determined as far as I was concerned. So just wanted to make that known as well.
Okay, and that is listed under MAC. So
yes.
Thank you for that.
Okay,
good question. All right, so what I need to hear from this group is, again, ultimately, if we are comfortable cutting departments, the departments that have large numbers of new employees that will not be happy, but possibly would have less of an impact than other departments are.
Chair?
Yes. Councilmember Toombs.
Are we cutting or delaying?
Delaying.
Okay.
Well, the request from OMB is where it makes sense to simply delay an entire year to do that. I mean, we can delay half a year if we need to. It just means we have to do twice as many.
Okay.
So we can do it either way.
May I just add that
Yes.
a lot of the positions you mentioned are either crew-based or precinct-based, and so just like a 1 or a 2 doesn't work. Like, we got to look at it more holistically. And I think the only thing worse than funding the positions for half a year and figuring out how we're going to fund them next year is to figure out how we're going to fund them this year, and then the economy turns and we have no way to fund them next year. So I guess if I had a preference, it would be not to delay, but to not to delay for 6 months, but to postpone and think about it for a full year. I mean, we've talked about there, and I'm not making eye contact with anyone in the back of the room because I'm completely going rogue right now. But I am concerned about the fear of, like, we don't know what we don't know about the economy and what's coming next. So a 6-month delay, it's remarkably different. Like, you know, what I presented in this budget 2 months ago versus where we are today is a very different economic condition. And it gives me pause to say we should commit ourselves to something in 6 months that very much might not be the case. So if we're making the decision to delay, I guess I'd be more comfortable delaying an entire budget cycle than committing ourselves to a 6-month delay.
So if we did a 6-month delay, and let's say the economy prayerfully does not, but that it goes south, couldn't we do a hiring freeze as we've done in the past during COVID?
Sure, yeah, I just get nervous about taking on people and then, you know, maybe it's month 8 instead of month 6 and the wheels have fallen off. And like I said before, you can't miss what you never had. So I guess I'm a little more pragmatic that way, in that I would think if that's the strategy we're looking at, either delaying or postponing for a year, I would be towards the latter of that camp. And not for all of them, not for all 500, just for, you know, a value of some portion of that. I think you could make a case to holding off.
Councilmember Mendez.
Just continuing on this conversation a little bit about FTEs. I mean, I'm gonna pitch an argument from both sides of it. If you're a council member who's completely uncomfortable with the idea of trying to mess with the number of FTEs in this proposed budget, and you'd rather keep it the same than try to find the extra $9 million or whatever else your pet project is, it's pretty easy to think about that. Just say no to any changes. If you're interested in limiting or delaying some of the FTEs to find some money, then come up with whatever explanation you need to make yourself feel good about it. But we're not picking the number of FTEs in the budget. We're going to put a number next to a line item, and then the executive branch is going to decide what to delay 6 months, what to delay 3 months, what to not hire at all. And I think we're all going to be looking to the committee chair that's going to be the number probably at the starting point for particular departments. And so I think the only useful conversation as we get to 3.5 hours till our quadratic voting deadline, pick a number. Like you know how much you want to fill for other spending, and that translates into X number of full-time positions or X divided by 2 of delay half a year. But fundamentally, that's all us talking to ourselves in our heads. We're just like picking a number next to a line item that takes like one line on the budget, and then they're going to figure out whether to delay or not hire.
Thank you. Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you. Just for clarification, we're looking to fill the $9 million or $10 million hole. Do we have to stick with that number?
May I back up and say, we have 55 items.
Okay.
And all of them are important to somebody.
Okay.
And that $9 million hole is important to a lot of us. If that $9 million hole fills up everything we do, then the other 54 don't happen.
Okay.
So some of the information I need from y'all is, are we willing to drop everything else and do that? And none of the other things happen, or are we willing to do that to some degree?
My question
And you
is,
can't really vote on that, but you can let me know.
does it have to be 9 million? My question is,
That's a
if
good
we
question.
give them 5 million and let them figure out how to do it, that's my question. So it doesn't have to be 9 million.
That is a true statement. I mean, we don't really have a way to vote for that, but this body can have a mushy discussion right now and let me know. If it turns out the only way we can get any of the other stuff is to reduce that to something, and I see Matt raise his hand, I'm gonna recognize you in just a second. If that's part of where we want to go, that's helpful to know, because that may open up a lot of other options for other important things that we're discussing.
That helps me because I don't want to cut FTEs, but I do want to do something to address the support staff living wage. So if we can find a number where we can do both, that's what I'm striving, always striving for balance.
Balance.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Matt, did you have anything you were going to add about?
I just wanted to say that if it would be useful to essentially reconstruct the ballot with some changes and resend it, we could do that. I think there's I'm worried it'll be confusing, particularly to those who are not here, but it's up to Chair Allen.
I appreciate that offer. I agree with your concern that it would be confusing. I think there's going to be some discretion happening anyway, so if we can, through this discussion, talk further about not only the possibility of not necessarily 9 million, but also again, how we feel about FTEs and that type of thing, then we'll make use of where the information drives us. Councilmember Mendez.
I'm sorry for repeated comments, but this, just because we're about to vote and you're about to consider the responses, and while we've got the folks here, I want to mention that when quadratic voting was used as an experiment by the Colorado legislature, they did do it where it was blind, so the results weren't known. And according to media reports, one of the state legislatures there commented that the point of having it be anonymous was to remove the specter of political pressure to vote one way or another. And so I think you should make sure the fact that we're going to be different than how Colorado did it. You should consider that when you're thinking about your substitute, because with it being public, potentially that does influence how we approach it. And then secondly, from what I've been able to tell from reading while we've been talking academic literature and results out of California, it's definitely the literature would indicate that this should be the way it was put in Colorado, better signal, less noise, but not determinative of anything. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Other comments or questions? So we move ever closer. Councilmember Hancock.
I'm sorry, what if we finish our survey before you decide to switch it all around? Then do we submit again?
So according to, and at some point I'll let these guys give us instructions, but I don't feel like we're through with our discussion yet. You can change it. You can actually go back and change it until 10 o'clock.
Yeah, you can reopen your ballot and change your allocation until it's closed at 10 o'clock.
Super, thank you.
Okay, good question. So I think the two things we have before us are to finish our discussion of funding sources, and then we're going to circle back around and go through the ballot one last time and talk about the items that we have stricken from the ballot, and then we will send out an email to the folks that are not here clarifying those items and that the time has been changed to 10 p.m. So let's try to finish up our thoughts on the funding sources, which may give us that number before we vote, which I think would be handy to have. But I don't know that I can do the math that fast.
I'm binding them up for you.
Okay, good. It should be in your inbox. Make sure that Johnston didn't get spelled correct. We'll check with them and make sure. Okay. So I think the final piece of funding sources, let me look back at my list. Yeah. We also, we're talking about positions right now. So of the departments that we talked about, I'm not asking people to give numbers because I don't think we've got time to do that, but of the departments that we listed, are there any that people would absolutely say, no, don't take money for them, or any that people would make other statements about? The ones that I listed were police, fire, NDOT. I have said sheriff because they're fulfilling contractual obligations. So police, fire, NDOT, parks, we've already taken 7 from, and codes. I think I actually took 1 from finance. Councilmember Pulley. There's a lot of. Those legitimate concerns. Okay, would you then trade that with, okay, I mean, that's helpful to know. Would you then limit what we do in our budget to the 2,940,000, I think we have about $3 million that we can spend.
I'm just looking at the funding sources for wish list items and where those funding sources appear.
Okay, just keep in mind, some of those funding sources are listed there, although they have been tapped out pretty heavily for the school budget thing. Okay, Councilmember Sepulveda.
I wouldn't want to get rid of the social services. It's a new department for, and it's
Homeless
just,
services.
yeah, and it's just 15 employees and it's new and we're having a lot of issues.
Yeah, I don't think I meant to miss that one. Thank you for that. Okay. Yes, you may. Can you use your microphone, please? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm hogging it.
Yeah, I thought this was Councilmember Johnston's microphone. I didn't know it was shared. So they list in 4% for the 5% pay COLA increase from 4% to 5%. They list 16.25 million from 4%. And in the $9 million for support, it also lists 16.25 million from 4%. I'm thinking that's just two separate. If we want to support both of those, does that mean we're looking at 32.5 million from 4% funds?
Are you on page 1 or are you on the electronic one?
I'm on the electronic one, but we can
Okay.
go.
My understanding is the 5% instead of 4% was 6.7 for the pay plan, although some of that is underwater, so that became 5.8, and then for M&PS, that was 6 million total, is the 5%. And I will report that MNEA, when they spoke, said they would prefer to see the living wage as opposed to the 5% COLA. I just remind people of that.
So I'm guessing that what this is a cumulative total of all the money that has been requested from the 4% fund. Is that what that is? What appears on our voting website?
Read me again which one you're saying.
All right, it would be the title, pay plan improvements, the 5% COLA instead of 4%. Funding source, it's got small business incentive, and it's got 16.25 million from 4% funds, which appears in more than one place. So I'm now starting to believe that that's a cumulative total of all the wish list items. Would that be correct?
All right, I am not looking on the electronic one. I'm looking on the paper one. Are you?
The answer is yes.
Okay. All right, I think that's right. I got my answer.
You're looking under the funding sources, and many,
Yeah.
the Minority Caucus had a nice bucket of funding sources that they simply listed for each one that adds up to more than that. So I think that was where that
Appreciate that.
that question was. Sorry to not answer that more directly.
No, that's
All right,
okay.
Councilmember Withers.
Thank you so much, Chair Allen. I just wanted to speak really quickly about the Planning Commission positions for the Housing planner. I think maybe one is a director and the other is a manager or something like that. But just wanted to remind the body that the planning department, we actually have legislation that is before the body now, but the planning department has done a fee study where they've revised some of their planning department fees. And so some of the positions that are being added are being paid for through that fee study that they anticipate, right? So that is one way of kind of acquiring some of those additional positions that we know our planning department needs, not only for a greatly growing amount of rezoning requests, but also more comprehensive planning studies such as East Bank, such as what they hope to do with Hickory Hollow, Edge Hill, and some other parts of town. But specifically for the housing piece, the planning commissioners had a work session today. Obviously, virtually every discussion that happens in our city, which includes schools and all those things, is about affordable housing. We do have a lot of I would say that everyone is on board with that, but at the moment, I would describe it as that we're throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks a little bit with affordable housing, and having and being able to attract some expertise for housing policy will help us to make smarter decisions about how we deploy our housing programs, number one, but also how we look at things like growth and development and how do we line up supply with demand in some ways. So just wanted to give a plug to those two. I think some of the planning commissioners during the work session were a little bit surprised at the administration that being that we have such a housing crisis in the city, that the administration would take a red pen to anything that has the word housing next to it. So just want to say that those two positions are very strategic to so many other discussions that we're having, and specifically with the intent of bringing in some real policy expertise that we just don't have right now. And in fact, one of the things that we talked about today at the Planning Commission work session is that some of this housing expertise, for instance, may not necessarily be someone who's an urban planner by trade. It could be an economist. It could be, like we really need some guidance to help solve major problems in our city, and these two positions are, I kind of don't want to conflate them with the regular planners who are very skilled and we work them very hard as council members, but just those two positions are really critical, I think, to meeting our county's needs.
Thank you for that clarification. I will say again, many departments got half of the number of positions they got. Planning got 12 out of 14 out of, hang on, let me look at that. All but two, 23 out of 25. But every one of them is needed and certainly will. That is the dilemma that is before us. Everything that's proposed is good. Okay, this has been a great discussion. I will go home and agonize over everything I've heard. I welcome your guidance on how these things line up in order of importance. I will do my best to come up with something that I think is equitable and fair, and I will recognize Councilmember Stiles, and then we're going to our voting guys and getting instructions. Councilmember Stiles.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Go over the list, yeah.
I just wanted, very briefly, because I'm getting ready to leave, to mention the, in the Metro Action Commission, the position for restorative therapists and how important that would be for us to support those positions. We have never, as a city, poured into supporting direct child care. This is our opportunity to get started with that so that center-based care providers as well as home-based care providers would have an opportunity to receive therapy themselves while helping a much underserved population.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, I'm going to ask Councilmember Sawara to go over the list and remind us of which ones we have eliminated, and we'll include those in the email that I send out, and then we'll get instructions from Matt and Alex, who've waited very patiently. Councilmember Sawara.
So on the front page, the first page, we've eliminated item number 5, which is the 1 to 2 FTEs for the economic development. We also eliminated the one right below it, which is the Office of Music, Film, and Entertainment. Also on the same page, police, that is co-response task force FTE, 185,333. And then for the COB, you have 3 items. You have the choice of options 1, 2, or 3. You don't get to pick all 3, but you can pick which funding level sources you want for that. Also on page 1, we remove under social services, the 50,000 money for MC3. And then last on that page, we remove the low cap payments which is the second to the last item, 2,739,000. On the second page, we did not talk about this, but I think we need to remove item number 1, which is 700,000 for the ILS project based on the conversation we had with Councilmember Welch list. And then we're also removing the first 3 items on the public library, which is 110 additional slots for NASA security staff and extended hours. That's the 173,000, 57,000, and the 186,000. Next on that page, we removed the WeGo for 10 million. We also removed the 17 million for MMPS fund balance. Going right down, you go to also under MMPS raises for school board, 81,000. And then last on that page, we removed the 12 million for MMPS 10% COLA. On page 3, we removed the second to the last item, which is the 2,030,000 for 900, which is the ILS program. And I think we should also remove the 15 million for the bonds fund, which is the last item as well.
Because we expect that to come.
Because they will come from ARP money. Not that we don't want to fund housing, but the mayor has some 30 million ARP money for housing. And so we can take off that 15 million at this point.
Councilmember Evans? Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice
I
Chair.
wanted to go back to page 2, the NASA, saying that we should remove that. But previously it said, you guys talked about that they said they could use the slots. So did I miss something?
There's not an owner for it.
Oh, got it.
Councilmember Sepulveda.
I had one comment and a question. Can we just make sure that we note that the MC3 was just put on here twice, and so
Correct.
people don't get confused?
Correct. It is
in
now
that-
under MAC, which is
in
where-
that email?
Yes.
Okay, and then I missed the WeGo discussion.
So that is a hope to move that money, which would be lovely, from, there's a federal grant that is currently being used for operating. We would love to be able to move that to capital. But it is currently already funded by federal money, and to add that to this, we had pulled other things that already had existing funded sources off the list, and that seemed like consistent treatment for that item as well.
When does the grant end?
Mr. Byer, can you, we're talking about the $10 million capital funding that's federal funding for WeGo? Gotcha. So it will go through this year, and probably it continues. Which would be our preference, but it's not. So it will be there next year as well, I think is what you're saying, is that we have a reason to think it will be there next year as well. Right. So in a perfect world, we'll take it on, and that will give them more flexibility, but this doesn't seem to be the year, and that was kind of the consensus of the group before you arrived. Other questions? All right, this has been great discussion. I'm sorry that we have, our crowd has dwindled, but they will be able to do this from home. So Matt and Alex, y'all have been very patient. If y'all will kind of explain to us what we can be doing here, and we can start it here and finish it up at home. Y'all can text me if you have more questions. I'll communicate with these guys and see if I can get them answered. So we want everybody to understand what they're doing. So, Council, hang on.
If you have questions about the process, communicate through me and not the chair.
Good point. Sorry. I'll connect you with Ms. Darby and open. Thank you.
So-
Okay, Matt, you're up.
Okay. So I think that the voting process is fairly self-explanatory. I believe that it shouldn't be, it should be self-explanatory what to do when you open the ballot. You're essentially, you're able to vote multiple times on each item. That's the idea, right? So the number of sort of votes that you click using the plus button on each item is the number of counted sort of votes that you're signaling your support for that item. The only twist to this versus any other kind of multiple voting system is that each vote sort of costs you more than the last one. So everybody starts with a budget of 99 voting credits. So if you want to vote once on a particular item, it costs you 1 voting credit or voice credit. If you want to vote twice, it costs you 4 voice credits. If you want to vote 3 times, it costs you 9 voice credits. So what that means is that you can sort of go all in on the things that you support most strongly. But if you do that, it means you have less say left over to indicate support for the other items. So what this is intended to do is to encourage the voter to basically be thoughtful about where they're placing their support, and not to just go all in on the things that they feel most strongly about, unless you feel very, very strongly, right? So that you're willing to kind of have no say left over after you've gone on all in or almost all in on a particular item. I guess I'll leave it at that. I'm sort of happy to answer further questions about the process, and if anyone would like me to, I can explain a bit more about this sort of logic behind this, why this is an interesting way of voting. But I don't want to take too much of time.
As we saw in the exercise, if a lot of people vote for the same thing, which demonstrates consensus, then it gets a lot of votes. If one person cast the same number of votes for that, then they lose their ability to vote on anything else. So it's a great way to show what the body is supportive of and enable us to kind of arrive at that. So Councilmember Gamble.
I just want to confirm that if I choose to vote for the support staff increase, I know in the survey it'll be listed as 9 million, but we may not be able to do my 9 million. Can my vote just be to do something for that? Does it have to be stuck to that number?
No, I mean, ultimately, in the next day or two, I'm going to have to make a decision. And if everybody voted for that and 4 other things really enthusiastically, and the only way to make those other things happen is to reduce that down some, that is a choice that I will consider. And if this body says to me, we think that's what's left of this body, if y'all say that seems like a reasonable way to do it, we think that's good. It would be helpful to see heads nodding or vigorously saying, no, it absolutely 9 million or nothing.
Okay.
I need to know that. We don't really have a way to indicate that here, but if people can speak up to that point, because I think that's probably the biggest unknown out there at this point, other than, I think what I heard is we'd love not to cut any FTEs in any departments, and I'm just saying, it's kind of an either or. So, let me know. Councilmember Suara.
On the process, so if I like an item a lot and I vote for it 3 times, will it still count as 3? So if 3 other people vote once, then would that item have 6 votes in all?
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So basically, what's the average votes do you give for each? Because I think we've got quite a few that are very important and I'd like to see done. And if we take out some of the high cost, we might be able to include some of the smaller ones. So what's the average number of votes do you think that would be most equitable?
Well, it's hard to say what the average number of votes for each proposal will be. Depends how sort of concentrated the group is on a few of them. But for example, the council member sitting 2 to my right earlier was saying that the way she intended to do it was to basically go through all of the items and put 1 on all the ones that she liked, and then sort of go back through and put more on the ones that she, liked the most out of those ones, right? So, and I think that's actually quite a reasonable way of doing it, if that makes sense, right? So you can give some support to all of the ones that you like, and then figure out which ones you feel very strongly about and give a bit more support to those.
And there is a minus button, so if you change your mind, you can go down and knock it down to 2 if you decide you didn't really want to put 3 on it.
one other question, and I must have missed the social services motel. Is that for providing funds for motels for homeless
That's
community?
yeah, emergency housing. Yeah, sure is. Councilmember Syracuse.
Based on how we've whittled this list down, do they need to update their website before we open it up?
No, they have suggested, and I'm going to send out an email probably before I leave.
'Cause some folks-
Councilmember, actually, Director Darby is going to do this for me, I think.
Okay.
Just, that will just tell people about the items that we have agreed, that don't need to be voted on.
Because it's open right now, right? So, I mean, can you tell if anybody else has voted and?
And I will tell them that they can go back and change their vote if they
Okay.
voted for
All
something that doesn't need to be voted on. Change vote. I'm writing that down. And we'll send that out. Vice Chair?
99 votes in all, that you can split any way you want. All right.
Yeah. And I will remind me that the lawyer behind me has said, please remind everyone, these votes are non-binding. This is just guidance for the chair. My goal is to come up with a substitute budget that reflects the will of this body to the point that we don't have to have lots and lots and lots of amendments. You absolutely have the right to amend, but I'm hopeful that we've had enough of a discussion that I can reflect the wishes insofar as we can responsibly to take that into account. I'm doing my best, and this will give me additional information that will help me know how those things line up. So other questions? Councilmember Henderson.
Chair, I was at Traffic and Parking Commission, so I could not come earlier, but as Councilor Suara went through and eliminated some things, there were a few that I was surprised that were not eliminated because they were very obviously capital items like B-cycle stations. Traffic calming, I guess, is programmatic, but had that already been discussed or?
On Thursday, when we had the discussion, the B-cycle stations probably will move under 4% funding.
Okay.
And so as we make that, but again, there's a limit to how much we can take out of 4% funding. So I've got to account for that, as does the Office of Management and Budget when they start changing things around. So I still need to know if people support that or not. So I felt like it was still appropriate to leave it in there. If we do it, it will affect our budget. It will affect what's currently in the budget under one category and move it somewhere else.
I appreciate that. We just need so many B-cycle stations at so many different libraries, and it just, it's just one. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Two. Other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to officially adjourn us, but feel free to hang out and ask these guys questions or play with it a little bit until you've gotten your questions answered and finish up at 10 o'clock. Please no later, because I have to wait till then to get started, and that's past my bedtime. We are adjourned. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.